So with that, again, welcome everybody. Welcome any new attendees this morning. This morning, again, we have what we call one of our special Catholic man mornings. A person from Holy Orders or on the path to Holy Orders to kind of talk to us about their journey in their faith. And so we're privileged to have Father Ryan Adorjan join us this morning to give his talk about his vocation and that we all have our own vocation to lead our families hopefully to heaven. And so he'll be talking, and then we'll do a Q&A after that and kind of go from there. So with that, I think turn it over to Father Adorjan.
Morning, men. Good morning. Good morning, everybody on Zoom as well. Got some people waking up. Glad I'm not the only one on my PJs there. Nice. Yeah, thanks, Steve, for the invitation, and just a privilege to work with you and the other men on a really great initiative. We did have Fishers of Men at my first parish in Joliet, but it was just a different format than this, so it's always good to learn about a different way of doing something, right? And to be with all of you, and thanks, of course, to Jeff for making me look good, hopefully. Jeff's a great neighbor, by the way. It's good to have him living right next door there to the ministry center. He's nice and quiet, and he keeps those college kids. I think those are college kids that live in that house, right?
No, they're actually a little older this time.
Are they? All right.
So they're like 25-ish.
All right. Well, they're quiet too, which we appreciate that. Anyway, it's interesting. Your vocation story is your own story and how you come to know it, but I appreciate opportunities to tell my own kind of witness journey because it helps me just to appreciate it more, and to look back and to think, oh my gosh, I didn't notice that. And so to be able to reflect on it is helpful even to me and to the others, the priests in the house who have had a chance to reflect with each other on our stories. Of course, some of us have more stories than others. So if you know Father McGeehan, you know that he is pretty much nonstop stories, and you know almost nothing about Father McGeehan, but you know everything about Father McGeehan's worldview. But me, being young, my worldview is still sort of in cultivation, I guess. And Bishop Hicks has laid out his vision for the diocese to be something along the lines of the three pillars of catechesis, knowing about God, evangelization, knowing God personally, and then combining the two and living a true Christian life. And I always was like, why does he put catechesis before evangelization? Like, aren't we trying to have more evangelization? And we have a lot of people who are catechized but not evangelized, right? They know about God, but they don't know God. Isn't that the problem? But then as I reflected on my own story, that's exactly how I've grown in faith, is knowing about God first from my parents, from CCD in Oswego, and then coming to know him more personally through when I was in college, through the seminary, through prayer, etc. So it makes sense to me now. But I just propose that to you as a kind of framework, that if you're someone who feels like, all right, well, I'm in my vocation, I might be a married man, or I'm a settled, on the question of marriage or whatever, and I still am kind of struggling with where to go with it. Just be confident that as you know about God, be sure to couple it with true prayer and evangelization, knowing him, being with other people, especially men who know him. And I think you'll start to be more confident with it. So I come from, in some respects, a small family. I only have one older brother, but then in other respects, a big family. I come from a large Southside Irish Catholic family. I'm happy to be that. I'm in a betrayal to my race, as I'm a Cubs fan. In college, I used to have to hide all my Cubs stuff when my grandpa would come visit, because I think it would be a true disappointment to the family. But my dad is a North Sider, so I guess that's where it comes from. But my parents, Mike and Kim, they both met working at the Baby Ruth Butterfinger plant at Franklin Park. So Baby Ruth is my name, sort of, in their life anyway. They met there and got married, and I was actually born in Crestwood, Illinois. I was born at Palos Hospital, but in Crestwood. We lived for my first few years of life, and then my dad got transferred from Franklin Park to DeKalb, their distribution center for Nestle there. And so we moved to Oswego, and we've lived there ever since. My mom still lives in the same house that I grew up in. And in Oswego, there's no Catholic school, so I went to public school my whole life. So I'm still trying to beat out of myself the pagan worship and other things I learned in the public school. No, just kidding. I had a wonderful time in public school, and in many ways it shaped a lot of who I am and the way that I see myself, that I see other people. It was just a great opportunity to meet all kinds of people, and to be with people and learn about them, and in some sense be the interesting one for being Catholic. Now, I was never like walking through the hallway praying the rosary or anything. I have to admit that my own devotional life did not really take off until I went to the seminary, but I received a very good foundation in the faith from my parents. My mom was always big on going to Mass, of course, on Sundays, and she always wanted to do things like the Advent wreath, and we would say, she had a little prayer card that she'd print out for Christmas breakfast, or whatever, and just always a very kind of simple faith, but a lived faith. And my dad as well. He's had his own challenges in his life, which have had a huge impact on me, the way that I see myself as a man, the way that I see myself as a priest, certainly. My dad, thanks be to God, is a recovering alcoholic. His last drink was, I think, 16 years ago now. So praise God for that. And when I think about my dad, I think about a man who really encompasses what redemption looks like. Somebody who had no choice but to slam pretty hard into rock bottom, but then that actually becoming the greatest blessing of his whole life, and being able to climb back up again. So having the experience of my parents are divorced, so that's the first thing. Divorced when I was 13. And then, which, like, when a young man is 13, that's like not a very consequential time in life at all, is it? Oh God, yeah, that was a very important time in life. And then shortly after that, my dad, just really hit rock bottom, and so he was arrested twice. He had 2 DUIs. So just having the very peculiar experience of driving my dad to jail for 12 weekends in a row. That was what the judge wanted in the Kendall County Jail, so he could still work during the week, but he had no license. So he was a very successful businessman, a consultant for various companies in the world of logistics management and SAP, if anybody is familiar with that. But so he had to leave that behind because he didn't have a license and couldn't get anywhere. So he worked at the Oswego Mire for a few years. But he never lost his faith, and it was very inspiring to me at the time. And in fact, I look back now, and that was a good opportunity for me to get to know him because I was his chauffeur, which was a blessing because at the time he had this beautiful brand new Pontiac Grand Prix, which was turbocharged. So he let me drive it to school, because my 1997 Plymouth Breeze was not turbocharged. I'll tell you that. So it wasn't really popular in public school to talk about faith or to talk about being a priest or wanting to be a priest, but it's true that I've wanted to be a priest since I was 7, a little kid, and I don't know where really it came from. I remember this really just a true obsession with the priests in my parish, and just thinking that they were these like mystical men. Like, who are these people? They get to wear these cool clothes and play with the shiny cups, and like, what is it about that? It's so cool. And I remember, especially as a little 2nd, 3rd grader, thinking that, the part of the Mass when the priest, it's called the doxology at the end of the Eucharistic prayer, and the priest picks up the paten and the chalice, and he says, "Through him, with him, and in him, O God, Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever." And I remember being obsessed with the idea that guy's job, he's not making chocolate bars, he's not, my mom worked in a school library for a long time. He's not, working in an office. That guy's job is to, like, it touches forever somehow. Like, he gets to work with this idea of forever and ever. And that's cool to me. I was a 2nd grader, like, what the heck does that even mean? But it seemed more like a superhero in a way. So that was something that always really just fascinated me about the priesthood. So then, I started to play Mass at home, of course, apple juice and Oreos in my living room, and almost burned the house down a few times with candles and blankets and things, but that's okay. But then when you get to public school, people, I want to be a businessman, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a teacher, and then here comes Ryan, and I want to be celibate forever, People are kind of like, what do I do with that, So it sort of goes by the wayside, and I never stopped practicing the faith, but definitely sort of put the dream of the priesthood to the side. And I had a Presbyterian girlfriend in high school, and so she was pretty instrumental in putting the priesthood to the side. She used to call it, when I would altar serve in high school, she used to say, "Is it a robe day?" That's what she would call it. Anyway, we're not still together, in case you're wondering. But in high school, I really discovered this great love for learning and for teaching. And so the great debate at the end of high school was whether I'd be going to school. I wanted to go to Ball State in Indiana to be a high school band director, or come here to North Central to study English and writing and secondary education, which is what I ultimately decided to do. I wanted to be a high school English teacher. But it just was a kind of a bumpy time, In high school, I loved English, but I don't know. I love to write. I love to speak. But then I got to North Central, and I realized that I hated to read and write. So that was not very good for an English major with an emphasis in writing, I'll tell you that. And it was just so it was cool because you're reading and you're exploring new ideas, but I was so squashed by, these literary analysis papers you have to write, and the teachers are all like, you have to really look into the text, and, you have to really get into it, and what you see there and what you want to find there. And then you put down what you see there and what you find there, and then you get a C because the professor says, well, I didn't see it there. Well, you didn't say I had to write what you had to see there. So I just found that very frustrating, and I was just like, is this really going to be what these years are like? Can I just get through this and get to the fun stuff? But I don't know. So I also was studying, I was going to do a minor in French at North Central also. I studied French in high school and also at North Central. And then when I was at North Central is when I was living at Patterson Hall there at the end of Ellsworth Street. Patterson Hall is connected with Ward Hall, and we were the only freshmen, one floor of freshmen in this whole complex of upperclassmen. And we were Patterson Hall, as you know, is built into a hill. And so we were on one side of a hill, in the basement of this building. It was awful. And somehow I was on the cross-country floor. Of course, they have a great cross-country team at North Central, but I'm not on the cross-country team. Maybe you thought I was when you saw me, but no, I'm not. I play the trombone, okay? And so it was just a very interesting experience at North Central. And those guys, some of them are still my great friends to this day, but to be able, again, to be called out of the comfort zone into a place that I never thought I'd find myself, doing something that I never thought that I would be doing, fraternizing with the enemy, as a theater and band kid in high school, you don't fraternize with the sports kids, so I have to live with them now. And my roommate was on the tennis team, for goodness sake. So it was just kind of something that marks the journey, is these I have an idea and God says, no, you're going to do this other thing. And there's really no debate about it, right? But it's always for the best. It's always been for the best. St. Thomas More says, I have no doubt that even if it's not what I would have chosen, or if it's not what looks good right away, he says, I have no doubt that what God wants will always be the best. So that's sometimes hard to see. So when I was at North Central, I started coming to Peter and Paul at the 8 o'clock Mass back in the day. My mom was very emphatic that continued. She would drive here from Oswego to make sure that it continued. And she would take us to Mass. Sometimes my brother also was at North Central, but was living at home. And so he would come with her on Sunday nights, and we would go together as a family. And then my mom would buy us Starbucks afterwards, which was always nice. And that was just a really formative time as well, so we're not kids anymore. Mom's not shaking us at 10:45 to get up for 11 o'clock Mass in Oswego anymore. We're adults. My brother's here. He is just about to graduate. I'm here. She's, so it was, again, a shift from something that was childish, childlike, I guess, to something that was more my own and more mature. And I appreciate my mom being so emphatic that we were going to be going to Mass together. And just thinking about the sacrifices that she had to make every Sunday to drive from Oswego to Naperville, which is not that far. But if you have another life, like your own life to live, you probably don't want to be driving to Naperville every Sunday night and driving home at 9:30 p.m. or whatever after buying your children Starbucks. So that is such a beautiful witness for me. And then, of course, being at North Central, and it was Deacon Brown at the time. He took me kind of under his wing and said, like, who are you? Because you have this college kid coming to Mass every day, 5:15, coming to Mass in the evenings on Sundays. And so he said, we need an altar server at Sunday night Mass, so will you come and help with that? And I said, yeah, of course. So pretty much for the whole school year, I altar served at Mass at 8 o'clock. And that, I think, is really where the journey speeds up and takes off, because my priests in my parish growing up, I had the same ones my whole childhood. Father Dan Stempora was the pastor at St. Anne's from 1989 until 2008. So my whole childhood until I was a junior in high school, he was the pastor there, and always would say things like, I have the application for seminary right here in my pocket. You just let me know when you want it, like, Father, I'm 8, I don't think I can go to the seminary right now. But he really encouraged me a lot and taught me about, what a priest could look like. But he was also like 75, you know what I'm saying? So Father Malota was the first priest that I really got to know and met who was not 75, and who was, he was fairly new here at the time. I think he'd only been here for 3 years or so. So it was before the church renovation. It was before a lot of this stuff was changed and things that happened. So it was just a kind of very similar parish experience at that point to Oswego and Peter and Paul. And then he just took me right under his wing as well and started to not form me intentionally for the priesthood, but just be nice to me as a Christian man and show me that it's possible to be happy, healthy, holy, and also normal, and to be somebody who could be very happy as a kind of regular person and also as a priest. I think we have this conception that priests are far away from us, or that they, Pope Francis has a great line that he used at an ordination one year when he said, priests are not mushrooms and they don't just sprout up out of the floor on the ordination day. They come from families, they come from communities, they're real people, they have real stuff that they bring to the table, both good and bad. So just being able to learn that, and then through Father Malota to meet people like Paul Solomon, and actually Max Baina was the second seminarian that I had ever met in my whole life, and Max, of course, the pastor at St. Margaret Mary, and my classmate and one of my best friends to this day, so really grateful for his friendship for sure, but don't tell him I said that. Midnight Mass, Christmas Eve, 2010, Peter and Paul. I was asked to be one of the MCs for it, which was a great honor. And that I was the incense guy that night. And so Mass was going on, and I remember I was sitting, if you're looking at the altar, I was sitting on the right side, and it was during the gospel, and I was looking up back at the Christ the King window. I just remember it so well. I was looking at the Christ the King window, and I heard someone looking for me. Ryan, looking around, but I didn't see anybody, but I had the incense, remember? So I thought maybe I was just feeling it, you know what I mean? And so I just let it go. And then during the Eucharistic prayer, there's a part of the Mass called the epiclesis, which is where the priest puts his hands over the gifts and he says, Lord, send your Spirit upon these gifts and make them holy. And as soon as Father Malota said, Spirit, send your Spirit upon these gifts, I was daydreaming again. I was looking at the Christ the King window again, but I heard my name again, Ryan. And this time I knew it wasn't someone else looking for me, but I knew it was the voice of God. And here's how I knew, because instantly the word priesthood came into my head. Priesthood. It was like repeating. And then it was sort of like a cheesy movie, I guess, where I just had all these memories of playing Mass as a kid and telling my grandpa that I'd be the first American Pope, when I was only 7, and he just found that delightful, Just these dreams that I had had in high school of going to the seminary and having it all planned out and really wanting to be a priest. And it was sort of like, oh my gosh, this life, this thing, I don't know what to call it at the time, that I hadn't thought about in probably 2 or 3 years, because I was focused on with a Presbyterian girl for one, but then I was focused on college and teaching at North Central, and I was working in admissions, and I had a job in Oswego, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I'm totally doing the wrong thing. Like I'm not on the right path right now. And so it was this like urgency, I remember, that I need to go to the seminary. I have to go. There's just no way about it. And so the next day I emailed Father Burke, and Father Burke, I always make fun of him for this now, but I sent him this, like, it was probably a 45-page email, you know, like, here's who I am, and I'm from Oswego, and like, whatever. And this is what happened to me, and, you know, I want to go to seminary. And it's Christmas Day, you know what I mean? So Father Burke does not want to be emailing me on Christmas Day. And so he responded with one line that just says, "Sounds like you have a vocation to me, period. Merry Christmas, Father Burke." Thanks, Father Burke, you know. And of course, we got in touch later. And so then that January, I started going to these priestly discernment groups at Father Burke's house in Joliet, at the John Paul II house. And just, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the influence that those meetings had on me. A lot of us who are priests today got our start in those groups. I know Max went to one for a long time, Jim Olafson, Mike McMahon. They all met each other through those groups. In my group that year, Father Mark Bernhard was there, Father John Haniotis was there, and a few guys who made it with us in the seminary for a while and then decided other paths. But those groups were really seminal for us to be able to not just now know about God, but begin to really meet him, you know. All right. So I left for seminary in August of 2011, 10 years ago this year. And I went up to Minnesota, to St. John Vianney at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And again, like, why am I living in Minnesota now? I never thought I'd be living in Minnesota. I thought I was going to live in Naperville and then get a job and teach in Oswego and become the principal in Oswego and die. You know, like, I thought that would be the trajectory, but I guess not. So here we are in Minnesota, learning a whole new way of life and meeting all these people. And, you know, the college seminary is not meant to form priests. That's one of the big things. The college seminary does not form priests. The college seminary takes men, young men, and makes them not be jerks anymore. That's what the college seminary does. And as you can see, sometimes that effect wears off, you know, after a while, and the jerk comes back. But that's the point of the college seminary. It's not to make you don't study theology in college seminary, you don't study the liturgy in college seminary, you don't study pastoral counseling in college seminary, you study philosophy, and you study the catechism, and that's it. Why? Well, because you have to have a foundation to study theology, right? But the main emphasis is the formation that you receive. And then when you go to Mundelein, that's when you learn how to be in the nuts and bolts of priesthood. So they say that college seminary doesn't teach you how to be a priest. It takes the jerk out of you. Mundelein takes that man and gets him ready over 4 years to learn how to be a priest. But then you don't learn how to be a priest until the day that you're ordained. And you never stop learning how to be a priest. Just like you don't learn how to be a dad till you're holding your child in your arms. You don't learn how to be a husband till you're walking down the aisle. You can have tips, you can have an idea, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but until you're in it and doing it, oh my goodness. So that's such a similarity, I think, between the priesthood and between the married life and the working life and the fatherly life. So I spent 3 great years in Minnesota, and I studied philosophy and Catholic studies. A part of that, we got to go to Rome for a semester, so I studied abroad in Rome, and that's when I went to Lourdes. So some of you earlier in August when I went to Lourdes this year, I think heard that story. My brother and my dad both had cancer at the same time. My brother had testicular cancer, and my dad had prostate and bladder cancer at the same time. And I was still a jerk at this time, remember? So Bishop Conlon asked me one day in a meeting, like, how's everybody doing? How are you doing with all this? You know, and Father Ryan, who at that time didn't know how to communicate except through sarcasm, said, well, I'm doing fine with the bishop, but you'll be happy to know that I've chosen a line of work where I won't really be using that part of my body too much. And the smile just sort of fell off his face. And I realized the guy had made a grave error. Yeah, and I got a lecture about the importance of that part of my body. Oh God, I'll never forget it. Without that, you'd be a 12-year-old girl, and I'm not ordaining a 12-year-old girl. Big lecture. Oh, sorry, Bishop. Anyway, of course, Father Burke was in that meeting also, just laughing away in the background. Anyway, so that was just a very influential part of my life as well, that trip to Lourdes and really seeing the power of intercessory prayer, the power of the Virgin Mary in the church, and the power of the Virgin Mary not just in my life, but also in my vocation and in my priesthood. And we were there on midnight mass on January 1st, the feast of Mary, Mother of God, and I offered my intention for that mass was my brother and dad's complete healing. And 2 weeks later, I had come home and they were both cancer-free. So I know it was Mary. I just know it was her. So anyway, so then in 2014, I graduated from St. Thomas and I went to Mundelein for 4 great years and left there in 2018 when I was ordained. It's a good reason to leave the seminary. And I was ordained on May 26, 2018 at the Cathedral in Joliet. And the Cathedral was my first assignment for the last 3 years, 2018 to 2021. And then, yeah, just to be able to move then back to Peter and Paul, to move back to Naperville, back in a sense to North Central, and to see it from the other side of the street now, and to get my payback for all the loud things that I probably caused the priests in those years. And now I have to hear them all night long on Fridays and Saturdays walking down the street. It's a true blessing. The truest blessing actually is that I don't have to park anywhere in downtown Naperville anymore. I can just park right here at the rectory, you know, that's a good thing. And my mom can too, okay, so she's happy about that. But it's just interesting then you have this vocation and then within the call it's just been this kind of crazy, the last 3 years especially have just been so, like, again, I never thought I'd be doing like what I'm doing, you know, so I'm a parish priest, but I'm also teaching high school, so God gave me that back. I'm teaching high school theology, not English, which I can assure you is a much better fit for everyone, at Chesterton in Lisle, which I love that so much. That's an awesome place. I'm happy to talk to you about it if you want, but I also serve on the Presbyteral Council for the diocese, the secretary of that. It's like student council for priests. But it's important. I mean, it's an advisory body to the bishop, and to be able to serve the diocese in that way is an honor. And then my classmates, I have yet to write any of them a thank you note, but my classmates elected me to the personnel board as well. So the body of priests that decides the assignments and where priests are going to go and kind of how things are the puzzle is going to fit together, which has been a very interesting learning experience for me. As well, to learn from people who have been on there for a long time and have a really good mind for that stuff, and just to be asked to serve in that way has been great. I also am an adjunct professor at the seminary now, teaching. They have courses for lay men and women, so if any of you are ever looking for classes to take, you get a master's in pastoral studies there, or you could just get certificates, you know, in theology there without going down this whole degree path. But if you're someone who's like, I want to know more about the nuts and bolts of the faith, and I don't really know where to start, these programs from the Institute of Pastoral Leadership are a very good resource. So I teach scripture, anthropology, and morality, and I teach morality at Chesterton. So. Yeah, here I am at Peter and Paul again, and I just want to close with this. It's from Isaiah chapter 6. Anytime you get into the prophets, sometimes it's not at the very beginning of their book. Sometimes it's in like Isaiah 6, but the prophets all have vocation stories within their writings. They all tell the moment that God asked them to be a prophet or asked them to do something. And almost always it's this, no, I don't think I'll do that. You know, we were reading this week from Jonah, right? And no, God, I don't think I'll go to Nineveh. And then God sends a whale, you know. No, I think you'll go to Nineveh, God says. So this is from Isaiah, and it's I think of all the prophet stories, it's the one that really resonates with me the most, and speaks the most, I think, to where the Lord has really taken me, that to go from someone who doesn't know anything about God or the church, then over time to learn about those things, and then in the midst of it to be introduced to the living and risen Jesus, who I'm proud to call a brother and proud to call a companion and proud to call my God, obviously, my Savior. But Jesus is God's companionship with the whole human race. Don't forget that Jesus has walked among us. He lived our life and died our death so that he could rise as the first fruits of our resurrection and then ascend into heaven to pave the way for our own resurrection and our own ascension to live with him at the right hand of the Father. That Jesus is our brother in all things because he's decided to be. He's lived our life and died our death. But he's also God, right? And he calls us to himself. He calls us to himself so he can take us with him to the Father. And just to know him in that intimate way and to have have had a transformative relationship with him, that's what Christianity is. Christianity is not pay, pray, obey. Christianity is not a behavior management system. Christianity is the complete transformation unto glory. That's what we want. And so to be able to look back and to really have a sense of where I've been, of my own sinfulness, of my own jerkiness, of my own faults, but also of the ways in which God has used those very things that I thought would keep me from him and bring me closer to him. But we have to let him. So this is from Isaiah chapter 6. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne. His train filled the sanctuary. Above him stood seraphs, each one with 6 wings, 2 to cover its face, 2 to cover its feet, and 2 for flying. And they were shouting these words to each other: Holy, holy, holy is the Lord, the God of hosts. His glory fills the whole earth. The doorposts shook at the sound of their shouting, and the temple was full of smoke. Then I said, Woe is me! I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord, the God of hosts. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding in its hand a live coal, which it had taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. With this coal it touched my mouth and said, Look, this has touched your lips. Your guilt has been removed, and your sin has been forgiven. I then heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, Here I am, send me. He said, Go and say to this people, Listen and listen, but never understand. Look and look, but never perceive. Make this people's heart coarse, make their ears dull, shut their eyes tight, or they will use their eyes to see, use their ears to hear, use their heart to understand, and change their ways and be healed. I then said, Until when, Lord? He replied, Until towns are in ruins and deserted, houses uninhabited, and a great desolation reigns in the land, and the Lord has driven the people away, and the country is totally abandoned. And suppose 1/10 of them are left in it, that will be stripped again like the terebinth, like the oak cut back to the stock, for their stock is a holy seed. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So it's kind of intense in a way. And you have to put it in, I think, in the broader context of the teaching of the prophets and the way that the prophets write, So God is not, of course, advocating as the final end of Isaiah's prophecy, the destruction of his people, but he's sending Isaiah as a man who is clean into the midst of people who are unclean, but a man who has been clean through great torment and difficult suffering. He had a live coal put on his lips, to purify him from that, from his uncleanness. And maybe if you missed the last line, suppose 1/10 of them are left in it, that will be stripped again like the terebinth, like the oak cut back to the stock. But their stock is a holy seed. So from the midst of the destruction and the decay, the Lord does what he has to do to all of us, but then he uses what he's done as a holy seed, planting something new, so that from the same stock that had gone wrong, from the same stock that seems to be destroyed, something new will grow from the seed. And then this is the part of Isaiah where Isaiah 7 is where we get into the virgin will conceive and bear a son, and from the stump of Jesse, a root shall sprout, right? So, anyway. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for listening. I hope that just gives you a little bit of an overview. Not every little detail, of course, but I'm happy to take any questions you have about anything we've shared this morning or anything really else, within reason.